So generosity in its deepest and fullest scope for me carries the reality of what we are willing to give away. And it has potential to transform and renew us. It has potential to renew all parts of our heart. Now, to help us understand what this looks like, we're going to explore what Jesus has taught about generosity and what a life of generosity looks like in Jesus. So to get us going today, what we're going to do is we're actually going to look at a chapter before chapter 5, chapter 4. My math checks out. And we're going to just jump into verse 17 and kind of get into this flow to help us bring some context and some foundation before we jump into the Sermon on the Mount starting next week. So in chapter 4, verse 17, we read, "The Isaiah prophesied revelation came to life in Galilee the moment Jesus started preaching. He picked up where John left off. Change your life. God's kingdom is here." Now, kingdom of God, the way of God, is an important theme that we really need to grab onto through the Sermon on the Mount. It's really important for us to understand generosity and what Jesus says in his sermon. We will need to wrestle and understand what this theme of kingdom and kingdoms actually means. Now, before we just get to Christianize the word kingdom, right? Because it's like a word we use often in church or in reading. There's lots of stuff about kingdoms. And because we hear these things, those of us that grew up in the church, we hear kingdom, we hear Sermon on the Mount, we're like, okay, yeah, I have these familiar markers, I kind of know where this is going, and we kind of can lose the real power that Matthew wants us to catch here. And so with kingdom, I really want to simply start with the fact that we actually all have a kingdom. All of us have a realm that is uniquely our own, where our choice determines what happens. Some of us have a large realm, large kingdom, where we have a lot of authority, we have a lot of say, and some of us have small, tiny kingdom. But that is our realm. All of us have a kingdom where our choices determine what happens. It's uniquely our own. So then Jesus shows up and says, change your life, because the kingdom of God is here. He's saying there's kingdoms that you have been creating. Your heart's been longing for this. So your heart's been creating kingdoms. You have been creating realms on the small sense and on the macro, on the big sense. You've been creating systems. You're creating things to make things work and operate. You're making kingdoms to make sense of your longings and your pain and your hurt. And all these things that you've been creating, they if we look closely and if we pull them out, if we expose them, they reveal all the best of your longings, but also all the worst of your longings, all the messiness, all the goodness. It's all revealed. And Jesus says, you know that those things just don't satisfy. You long for something, but they don't seem to satisfy. How do we step into this generous reign and a way of life that we seem to have some sense of, but can't just quite grasp? How do we enter this generous kingdom where we're all known and are loved? And it starts with Jesus showing up and saying, change your life. The kingdom of God is here. A kingdom that addresses the longings, a kingdom that confronts the kingdoms that we have developed, a kingdom that confronts the things that my heart has been seduced by, that confronts and exposes the mess that I might be hiding. A kingdom that says, you have a choice to follow or to reject. And then what does Jesus do after this announcement? So he made this grand announcement. What does he do immediately after this? He says, change your life, the kingdom of God is here. What does he do right after? We read, he goes for a walk on the beach, which is pretty sweet. But anyways, walking along the beach of Lake Galilee, Jesus saw two brothers, Simon, later called Peter, and Andrew. They were fishing. They're doing their job. They're doing what they do. This is what they're good at. Throwing their nets into the lake. It was their regular work. It was their vocation. This is what they did. And Jesus said to them, come with me. Follow me. I'll make new kind of fishermen out of you. I'll show you how to catch men and women instead of perch and bass. They didn't ask questions, but simply dropped their nets and followed. A short distance down the beach, they came upon another pair of brothers, James and John, Zebedee's sons. These two were sitting in a boat with their father. This is family business. With their father, Zebedee, mending their fish nets. Jesus made the same offer to them, and they were just as quick to follow, abandoning boat and father. What does Jesus do? He starts with a small group of people. He comes to them and says, change your life. Here's your vocation. Here's your job. Here's what you know what to do. And there's a need for this. There's need for, like, people were fishing. They needed nets. They needed people to catch fish. Change your life. Like, we miss this sometimes in the stories because we've read them and like, yeah, Jesus did this thing. He showed up. He's like, hey, dudes, let's go this way. And they're like, hey, I got a posse now. Like, it's actually, Jesus is actually practicing what he's saying. He's inviting some people, and I imagine some people that Matthew didn't cover, who he said, change your life. And they said, nah, I'm really good at this job. And like, it provides. Or this is like my family business. My dad and grandpa and great-grandpa built this business. I can't leave this. And then he comes up to these four guys, 2 guys at a time, and says, change your life. And they respond. They follow. In their following of Jesus, as Matthew, as you keep reading the story, in their following, their hearts begin to be exposed. And they get frustrated with Jesus. And he challenges them. But despite that, despite of themselves and all their ordinary imperfections, they are brought into this relationship. They invite Jesus, as they change their life, they invite Jesus into the deepest parts of them. And he exposes those things and then slowly begins renewing and transforming their hearts. Jesus, in this relationship, Jesus begins to transform and renew our hearts as much as we allow him. As much as we're willing to expose and humble ourselves and say, yeah, I don't have this figured out. Yeah, I have all these needs and I think this is and I really want this and it's just not happening, but I trust you, Jesus. Or, Jesus, I want you to do this in my life, but you're not doing it the way I want it. It's just, and you pull it back. There's a response of what happens in our little kingdoms. This following of Jesus, this stepping into the kingdom of God will liberate us from our kingdoms if we let it, if we let him. So again, the kingdom of God is a story of God reclaiming his world in Jesus and forming a people who will live under the reign of the king. And friends, for some of us, can I suggest for some of us, it'll be massive like it was for the fishermen. For some of us, it will mean to like legitimately change our lives, like new kingdoms, maybe new vocations. It may mean that. For others of us, it'll be a massive change, but within our hearts and the kingdoms and structures that we've created. Systems and rules that we have created to make sense of our pain in life. And God will say, change your life. Because when we give Jesus the reign of our lives, when we step into the kingdom of God, we will see in the next few weeks that Jesus actually doesn't begin with theorizing. He doesn't begin with like rules and instructions. He doesn't do that. He actually fulfills those, and he plunges immediately into the guts of the human experience. He plunges into the raging anger, contempt, hatred, obsessive lust, verbal manipulation, revenge, slapping, suing, cursing, coercing, and begging. He goes right into the real life stuff.